Hello everyone and welcome to Waffle Flower Crafts. It's Shannon here, and in today's video I'll be showing you how to create a rainbow card using an inlay die cutting technique. I'm going to start with these Waffle Flower products today. First up is the A2 Nested Domes die. This just came out in our last release. The Congrats stamp set, using that for sentiment, and I will finish off my sentiment with the Celebrate word die. I'm going to start with the A2 Nested Domes die, and I'm going to use a magnetic sheet here to help me position them so that they have the same kind of gap between each one of these nested domes die, because I'm going to use all of these at once. I really like using that magnetic sheet for this because these dies are very thin and it's easy to bump them. I've already tried doing this just on my work surface, and it's really easy to bump them and get them out of place while you're positioning the next one, which can be very frustrating. So the magnetic sheet is very, very helpful because you can easily get them in position and they kind of stay put while you use some tape. I'm using painter's tape here to kind of hold all these 5 dies in place. Actually, there are 6 dies in place. It'll make 5 domes, but there are 6 dies. So I'm just using some painter's tape here now that I've got them all positioned just where I want, and the painter's tape is just going to hold them in place. And I'm not going to remove this painter's tape until I'm completely done with the card, because I'm going to use this little ensemble of dies several times. So, and I want, if I take them apart or bump them, I won't have the same spacing and it'll kind of throw off the whole project. So I really want to leave that painter's tape on there until I'm completely done. So now that I've got my dies all positioned, I'm going to pull out my colored cardstock here. I'm using 5 different shades because, again, there's 5 different rings. And granted, these are not quite like exact rainbow colors, but like approximate. Like this kind of aqua turquoise color is going to kind of serve as my green color. I just wanted to do something a little bit different than the traditional rainbow shades. So this is a little bit more of like a jewel toned kind of rainbow. Alright, so I have a sheet of paper here that's actually, it's a 8.5 by 11 cut in half. So this sheet is actually so it is a 8.5 by 5.5. I'm going to, after I've die cut this first set of rings out of this turquoise kind of color, I'm going to actually use that other half of that 8.5, 5.5 sheet of paper to die cut a second set of rings out of the same color. I'm going to do this for all 5 shades that I showed you in the very beginning. So all 5 shades of those different colored cardstocks, I'm going to take the rings and die cut them twice. Now I don't need to, I'm die cutting way more of these nested domes than I really need. Well, not the quantity is right, but the length of the dome, I don't need to cut as much. I don't need to cut the whole dome. You can see right there I've got a partially cut dome there. So you do not have to use, because we're going to use 2 sets to make our design on the A2 card face. So I definitely don't need all that length of the dome, but I just didn't want to have to fuss around with making sure everything was perfectly positioned. This just makes things a lot easier by giving myself that extra length. So right now I've got the A2 card base here. This is just a panel, so I'm sorry, it's an A2 panel made out of 110-pound white cardstock, and I'm now actually cutting kind of the white parts of my inlay die panel front. So I'm actually not going to use those white arches or dome cuts right there. I'm not going to use those. I'm going to put those aside and actually save those, because I'll show you guys another project next week that you can use the scraps from this project today for another card, because you can actually make 5 cards today with all the die cutting that we do, because you do die cut quite a lot, and you can make 5 cards. And then I'm going to make additional cards on top of those 5 with the scraps from today's project, and I'll show you that next week. Okay, so I just flipped it around and I'm die cutting the other portion of it now, and I'm going to save all these scraps except for those kind of domed arched rings. I'm saving those for next week, but I'm not going to use them in today's project. I'm going to use those scraps right there, and I will kind of lay them out so you can see. So in those like negative spaces, that's where my rainbow rings will go, the inlaid rings. So now I actually have my card base, and again, this is a 110-pound white cardstock. It's an A2 card base, so it has a fold. It's a top folding card, and I'm going to adhere this partial part of my panel. The edge of will flip over, and it'll be the left side of this panel will line up directly with the edge of the card base. So that's what I'm using as my guide to line up. So that edge I'm lining right up to the folded line, the edge of my card base. The other edge kind of gets cut off, so you can't use that as a guide to line it up. So now that I've got it all glued in place, I now can start gluing the domed strips. So you can see how there's a lot of overhang. So you can definitely cut, if you want to be more conservative with your paper, you can definitely use less. Again, I just used most of the length of the die just so I didn't have to worry about not having enough of the paper to cover the card front. So I'm just going to continue kind of doing a rainbow pattern or rainbow order here, gluing the back of the arched dome and then positioning it butting it right up against the second one. And because you have that little bit of thickness, it's easy to get it lined up right up against the previous arched dome. So I'm going to continue this. I'm actually going to do the other side as well, and I will meet you back at the end when this is almost done. So I'm just finishing up here by placing that last piece of the panel in there, the white part. And now you can see I have some trimming to do. I'm going to use my paper trimmer and some scissors to kind of trim this, and I'll come back. Okay, so here's the completed card or card front. I've trimmed both sides. I used a scissor on the right side and the paper trimmer on scissors on the left, paper trimmer on the right. It really doesn't matter. You could use scissors for both. I just find it difficult to do the paper trimmer on a near fold, so I used the scissors. Okay, this is the congrats stamp set. I'm going to pull off a sentiment, just says your special day, and I'm got a little strip of scrap black cardstock here. I'm going to position that towards the bottom, and then I'm just going to stamp this and then heat emboss this. So I'm actually using, so since I'm doing some heat embossing, I put down some anti-static powder. I'm going to use Versamark ink. That's going to be my embossing ink today. I'm just going to ink up that sentiment, stamp it, and I actually will ink it up 2 more times and stamp it just to make sure that I have plenty of ink on the surface of that black cardstock, and the embossing powder will stick to it nicely. So I've stamped it 3 times. I'm pulling out some white embossing powder here, just getting a little bit on top of the surface, and then I will heat set that with my heat gun. So classic black and white sentiment strip. Now I've went ahead and taken the Celebrate Word die and die cut it out of white cardstock and white craft foam, and I'm going to layer the 2 together. This is going to create a dimensional sentiment, so have some nice dimension to the card front. I'm just putting some liquid adhesive on the back side of the cardstock Celebrate, and then adhering it directly on top of the craft foam Celebrate. And I'm just using my fingers here to kind of pinch it and make sure they're both aligned perfectly. Okay, so these both are going to go directly on the card front. Again, going to use some liquid adhesive here to adhere the Celebrate, and then after I trim down that black sentiment strip, I also added some foam tape to the back side, and that will also be dimensional as well. And while I'm adhering this, I just want to mention that you can make 5 cards, and I do make 5 cards with all these rings that I die cut, or all these domes that I die cut. The only thing is you cannot have the same order of colors for each card. Each card will have a different order. So this card is the only card that will be in rainbow order. My other cards will be in just different orders. And I think they all look beautiful, even though this is the only one that is actually in rainbow order. And that's just because I've already used both of my largest pink rings for this card, so I cannot use those pink rings for the outside again. So pink will have to be in a different position for the other cards, and that's the same for all the other colors. I hope you guys enjoyed this video today. If you want any more information on the products I use, please visit waffleflower.com, and you can follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook for more creative ideas. Thanks for watching.